In December of 1931, a search party combing the Arizona desert followed the sound of a dog baying under a Palo Verde tree. What the dog had found was a human skull, and there were two holes in it. The skull belonged to a 66-year-old man who walked with a cane, a man who, 6 months earlier, had limped into these mountains chasing a map to the richest gold mine in America. A scientist from the Smithsonian examined the skull and said there was a strong probability he'd been shot through the head with a high-powered gun. And the map he'd carried in, the one that supposedly pointed straight to the gold, was gone, vanished, never recovered. The local sheriff ruled it death by thirst. That single contradiction, a bullet hole in a skull, officially explained as dehydration, is the heart of the most dangerous treasure hunt in American history. This man was not the first to walk into these mountains and never walk back out, and very far from the last. For more than a century, people have chased a vein of gold hidden in the Superstition Mountains east of Phoenix, and an unsettling number of them have died doing it. Some from the heat, some from falls, and a few under circumstances nobody has ever been able to explain. Here's the part that keeps the whole thing alive. The man at the center of it was completely real. His gold was real. When he died, 48 pounds of it sat in a wooden box under his bed, so rich that assayers could barely believe what they were looking at. He just never told anyone where it came from. So here's how we're doing this. 6 numbered parts. Starting at number 1, the legend everybody thinks they know, working down to number 6, the thing at the bottom almost nobody wants to say out loud. Each number gets darker and closer to the truth. Stay to the end, because the most disturbing detail isn't how these people died. It's that knowing all of it, people still go in. We start at the top. Number 1, the man. Before we get to the bodies, you need to understand the man, because everything hangs on him being real. His name was Jacob Waltz. People called him the Dutchman, but that's a misunderstanding that stuck for 130 years. He wasn't Dutch. He was German, Deutsch. And somewhere along the way, the word got bent into Dutch and never got corrected. He was born in the Kingdom of Württemberg around 1810, crossed the Atlantic as a young man, and became a naturalized American citizen in Los Angeles in 1861. He drifted west like thousands of restless men, chasing the dream through California and finally into the Arizona territory, where he settled on a small homestead along the Salt River near Phoenix and worked the land. By every account, Waltz was a quiet, guarded, solitary figure. He kept to himself. He didn't explain himself to anyone. And he had gold, good gold, rich ore he'd turn up with now and then, never saying where he got it. In February of 1891, the Salt River flooded and tore through his homestead. Waltz caught pneumonia in the aftermath and never recovered. A neighbor named Julia Thomas took him into her home in Phoenix and nursed him through his final weeks. And on the morning of October 25th, 1891, he died. When they went through his things, they found a candle box tucked beneath his deathbed. Inside, by the traditional account, was roughly 48 pounds of gold ore, so heavy with metal that the historian Tom Cullenborn estimated it was worth thousands of dollars in a time when a working man earned $1 a day. The Goldman brothers, who bought it, sold most of it to the San Francisco Mint. The gold existed. That part isn't a legend. You can trace where it went, which means the only real question, the one that has cost lives ever since, is where a quiet old German farmer kept finding gold that pure. And the answer, supposedly, died with him. Almost, because in those final days, lying in Julia Thomas's house and slipping in and out of fever, Jacob Waltz is said to have talked. He gave her directions. Not a map drawn in ink, but clues. The kind of riddles a dying man gives when he wants to pass on a secret without fully letting go of it. The setting sun, he said, shines into the entrance of my mind. From the ridge above it, you can see the military trail, but from the trail, you cannot see the mine. If you pass 3 red hills, you've gone too far. And the line that has haunted treasure hunters for generations. No prospector will ever find my mine. That's number 1. A real man, real gold, a deathbed riddle. It almost sounds wholesome, but the moment that secret left his lips, it stopped being a story about gold and became a story about what people will do to get it. Number 2. The fuse. Julia Thomas believed him. In August of 1892, less than a year after he died, she mounted the very first expedition to find the Dutchman's gold. She took 2 brothers, Reinhard and Herman Petrasch, and they spent about 3 weeks pushing through the brutal country around a towering rock spire called Weaver's Needle, matching the desert to the dead man's riddles. They found nothing. The search broke her financially. And here's where the story should have ended. 1 grieving woman, 1 failed trip, 1 secret lost to the desert. Instead, Julia did something that lit the fuse. To recoup her losses, she sold the story, and she sold maps to the mine for a few dollars each. In January of 1895, a writer named Pierpont Bicknell published a long article about the Lost Dutchman in a San Francisco newspaper, laying out the clues and the legend for the whole country to read. And just like that, 1 dead prospector became a national obsession. Thousands of strangers who'd never met Jacob Waltz suddenly believed they could find what he hid. That's number 2. The moment a private secret became public property. And underneath that fuse, an older story was already waiting, one that supposedly soaked these mountains in blood decades before Waltz arrived. Number 3. The massacre that may never have happened long before. Waltz, the legend says, there was a Mexican family named Peralta who found a fortune in these mountains. According to the tale, the Peraltas ran rich mines deep in the Superstitions in the 1840s, hauling out gold by the mule load. Then, in 1848, as they tried to move one last enormous shipment back to Mexico, Apache warriors ambushed the caravan and slaughtered nearly everyone. The place where it happened still carries the name on the maps today, the massacre grounds. The gold, the story goes, was scattered across the desert or sealed back into the mountains, and the location died with the men who were cut down that day. It's a spectacular story. For more than a century, people believed every word of it, staked their lives on it, carved it into the maps, passed it down as gospel. It's also, according to the historians who actually dug into it, almost entirely invented. A researcher named Robert Blair went looking for hard evidence of the Peralta massacre and came up empty. He concluded flatly that a Peralta family operating a gold mine in the Superstitions was, in his words, a contrivance of 20th century writers. There was a real Miguel Peralta who ran a profitable mine in the 1860s, but it was in California, not Arizona. The name appears to have been stitched into Arizona's lore, partly through a notorious land fraud scheme, and the first time anyone connected a Peralta mine to these mountains in print was that same 1895 article that spread the Dutchman's tale. In other words, the bloody Peralta caravan that supposedly predates Waltz may have been written into existence after him. The massacre that gave the mountains their darkest chapter might never have happened at all. So that's number 3. We dug down, expecting the legend to get more solid, older, bloodier, more real. Instead, it got thinner. The older story turned out to be the more invented one. That pattern, the closer you look, the less is there, is about to repeat. And belief in the Peraltas got a strange piece of physical evidence in the middle of the 20th century. Number 4. The Stones. In 1949, a man named Travis Tumlinson reportedly stumbled on a set of carved stone tablets near Florence Junction, on the edge of the Superstition country. They've been known ever since as the Peralta stones, slabs of carved sandstone covered in symbols, Spanish words, crosses, a carved heart, and a date, 1847. right around the era of the supposed massacre. To believers, they were the missing key. Carve by carve, they looked like a map left behind by the Peraltas themselves, a trail of stone breadcrumbs pointing toward the lost gold. There's just one problem. A lot of serious people think they're fake. Father Charles Polzer, an ethnohistorian at the Arizona State Museum, examined the stones and came away convinced they were forgeries. The carvings looked like they'd been made with modern tools, and the symbols and the Spanish didn't sit right for the period they claimed. Even some of the region's most devoted historians have treated the origin of the stones as dubious at best. Today, you can go see them yourself. They sit in a museum near Apache Junction, drawing crowds of people who lean over the glass and try to read a map that may have been carved by a hoaxer. Authentic relic or elaborate prank, nobody has ever decoded them into a pile of gold. So now, we're 4 numbers in, and look at what we're standing on. A riddle from a dying man. A legend that got more invented the older it claimed to be. A map carved in stone that may have been faked in living memory. And we still haven't hit the most uncomfortable one. The one that isn't about history or hoaxes at all. It's about rock. Number 5. The rock says no. Geologists have a problem with the Lost Dutchman Mine. Not curses, not maps. Rock. The superstitions aren't an ordinary range. They're the eroded bones of ancient volcanoes, knife-edged, built by colossal eruptions tens of millions of years ago. And volcanic rock like that, by its nature, doesn't host the kind of rich gold vein the legend demands. So the broad consensus among geologists is blunt. This is an unlikely place to be hiding a bonanza. Tom Cullenborn spent a lifetime on this legend. His conclusion was harder still. He never found real evidence the mine existed at all. Everything rests on hearsay. The facts, he said, simply don't exist. So how do you square that with the 48 pounds of undeniably real, undeniably rich ore under Jacob Waltz's bed? The leading theory among skeptics is almost more interesting than a hidden mine, that Waltz never had a secret vein at all. That instead, he quietly skimmed high-grade ore from a genuine working mine elsewhere. The Vulture mine near Wickenburg is the usual suspect, and let people believe in a phantom mine as cover. Real bonanzas did exist right at the edge of this country. The nearby Goldfield district pulled millions in gold out of the ground. So the gold was real, and the gold was close. It just may never have been where the legend swears it is. The Dutchman may have spent his last breath protecting a secret that was really just a lie he never wanted exposed. That's number 5, and it's the cold one. Strip away the curse, the massacre, the stones, and what's left is a quiet old man who may have fenced someone else's gold and let a legend grow over the lie like desert brush. No magic, no vein, just a story too good to die. But theories don't fill graves. People kept dying anyway, which brings us to the last one, the part that's still being written. Number 6. The bodies. This is the death that turned a regional tall tale into a national fear. His name was Adolph Ruth, and he was not a prospector. He was an older man from Washington, D.C., with a bad leg held together by metal pins and a lifelong obsession with lost treasure. His son had come into possession of old maps said to point to the Peralta mines, and Ruth became convinced they were real. In the summer of 1931, at 66 years old, he traveled to Arizona to find it. A local rancher named Tex Barkley took one look at the frail old man and tried to talk him out of going into the superstitions in June, when the heat alone can kill a healthy person. Ruth wouldn't hear it. He hired men to pack him into a remote canyon, then was left alone with his maps and his certainty. Within days, he was gone. When searchers reached his camp, Ruth had vanished. There was no sign of struggle, no sign of him at all, just an empty camp baking in the desert. The search dragged on for weeks and turned up nothing. Months passed. Then came December, and the dog under the Palo Verde tree, and the skull. A few weeks after that, The rest of his scattered remains were found roughly 3/4 of a mile away, dragged apart by scavengers across the desert. His pistol was recovered, fully loaded, not a shot fired. His checkbook was there. The metal pins from his leg were there. But two things were deeply wrong. First, the skull. When the Smithsonian's anthropologist, a man named Alish Hrdlichka, one of the leading figures in the field, examined it, he noted those two holes and wrote that they indicated a strong probability Ruth had been shot through the head with a shotgun or a large caliber rifle. Second, and maybe more chilling, in Ruth's recovered belongings was a note ending with a triumphant Latin phrase, Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. As if, before the end, Adolph Ruth believed he had actually found it. And the map he'd been carrying, the one that supposedly led to the gold, it was missing from his remains, never recovered. To a public living through the Great Depression, the story was irresistible and terrifying. An old man finds the legendary mine, writes I conquered, and turns up months later as a skull with a bullet hole and a missing map. Murder. It had to be murder. Someone followed him, killed him for the directions, and walked away rich. Except the official record refuses to cooperate with the ghost story. The county sheriff ruled Ruth's death natural, death by thirst and exposure. His argument was grimly practical. A crippled old man trying to walk miles across that savage terrain under a June sun would absolutely perish. And once he was dead, scavengers could easily account for a detached skull dragged across the rocks. The Smithsonian scientists' gunshot finding came in a report that was never officially signed off on by Arizona authorities. And decades later, in 1978, a county pathologist who reviewed the case concluded the holes weren't from a bullet at all. So which is it? A robbery and a killing for a treasure map? Or a stubborn old man who simply underestimated the desert, with the rest written in by our hunger for a darker answer? Nearly a century later, nobody can say for certain. And that uncertainty is exactly what pulled the next wave of dreamers in. Once people believed the mountains might kill to protect their secret, every disappearance started to look like part of a pattern. In 1947, a retired Phoenix photographer named James Cravey decided to find the mine his own way. He hired a helicopter to drop him directly into a canyon deep in the Superstitions, skipping the brutal hike entirely. He never walked out. When he was reported overdue, searchers found his camp, but not him. And the following February came the discovery that fit the legend's worst reputation a little too neatly. A headless skeleton, wrapped in a blanket, the skull lying about 30 feet from the rest. The coroner's jury found no evidence of foul play, natural causes, scavengers, the same explanation as always. But you can imagine how a headless skeleton landed in the newspapers. The Curse of the Superstitions had a fresh headline. And this is the moment to be honest with you about the body count, because this is where legend and fact get deliberately blurred. You'll see it claimed online that this mine has killed 600 people. That number is folklore. It traces back to nothing solid, just listicles and campfire math, and you should throw it out. The truth is more grounded and, in a way, more unsettling, because it's real. One careful tally counts at least 5 deaths directly confirmed to the treasure hunt over the past century and a half. Look wider, at everyone who has died in the broader superstition wilderness, chasing this dream, or just chasing the scenery, and reputable reporting puts the figure at more than 30. The Superstition Mountain Museum has said something like 4 or 5 hikers die or vanish here in a typical year, not from a curse, but from the heat, the cliffs, the dehydration, and the sheer ease of getting lost in 160,000 acres of knife-edged volcanic country. The mountains don't need a thunder god to kill you. They're more than capable on their own. But strip away the inflated numbers, and you're still left with a real, recurring fact. People walk into this range looking for Jacob Waltz's gold, and some of them do not come out. If that sounds like a dusty old story from the black and white era, here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. It's still happening. In our lifetime. In 2009, a 35-year-old hotel bellhop named Jesse Kappen left his job in Denver and drove to Arizona. Kappen wasn't chasing the gold the way the others did. He was chasing the legend itself. Stacks of books, drawers of maps, the whole story living in his head for years before he ever set foot in the desert. It had stopped being a treasure hunt and become the thing he was. He went into the Superstitions alone in December and didn't return. Searchers found his jeep and his camp, but Kappen himself had simply disappeared into the rock exactly the way Ruth had 80 years before. For 3 years, nobody knew what happened to him. Then, in late 2012, a search and rescue team found his remains wedged in a narrow crevice high on a cliff on Tortilla Mountain. He had fallen. DNA confirmed it. A man who'd read everything ever written about the mine ended up as one more line in it. And then there's the case that isn't about obsession at all. It's about warning and ignoring it. July 2010. 3 men from Utah, Curtis Merworth, Ardean Charles, and Malcolm Meeks, drove to the Superstitions to search for the mine. One of them had been rescued from this exact area the year before. He knew firsthand what this place does to people. He came back anyway. They went in at the height of summer, underprepared, temperatures past 110. They were found that winter, scattered across the same terrain that has done most of the real killing out here all along. 3 men, 1 summer, gone in a matter of days. The desert had told one of them exactly what it was, in person, 12 months earlier. It didn't change a thing. More than a century after Jacob Waltz took his secret to the grave, the mine had claimed another set of dreamers without ever proving it existed. The truth at the bottom. That's all 6. And now lay them on top of each other and look at what the stack actually is. A real German immigrant with real gold and no explanation. A first expedition that ended in ruin. A massacre that may have been invented. Stone maps that may be forgeries. A geology that says the gold shouldn't even be there. An old man with a bullet hole in his skull and a missing map and an official cause of death of thirst. A headless skeleton. A bellhop wedged in a cliff. 3 men lost in a single summer. And underneath all of it, a vein of gold that not one single person, in more than 130 years of searching, has ever conclusively proven they found. That's the real mystery of the Lost Dutchman Mine, not where the gold is, whether it was ever there at all. The most likely truth, that a guarded old man fenced someone else's ore and let a legend grow over the lie like desert brush, is somehow less comfortable than a curse, because it means all these people may have died chasing something that never existed. They didn't lose their lives to a mine. They lost their lives to a story, to the idea of the mine, to the unbearable possibility that this time, with this map, the desert might finally give it up, and it never has. The Superstition Mountains still stand east of Phoenix, drawing thousands of searchers every year into the same canyons that killed Ruth and Cravey and Kappen and all the rest. The gold, if it's out there, is still out there. The maps are still being sold. The stones are still being decoded. And every so often, the desert still takes someone who got too close to a secret. A quiet old man whispered on his deathbed and then carried, finally and completely, into the ground. Here's what I keep coming back to. Every person in this story knew the risk. They knew about Ruth. They knew the heat killed people. They knew that in a century of trying, nobody had ever come back rich. And they went anyway. So maybe the real question isn't whether the Lost Dutchman Mine is real. Maybe it's what it says about us. That we'll walk into a place that has buried everyone before us, carrying nothing but a riddle from a dead man, certain that this time it'll be different. If this story pulled you in, tell me in the comments which number got under your skin the most. Number 3, the massacre that may never have happened. Number 4, the stones that may be fakes. Or number 6, the bodies that are still turning up today. And if you want more stories where the line between history and legend gets dangerously thin, subscribe and stick around. Because the West is full of secrets that people died to keep, and we're just getting started digging them up.